have multiple famous legends, but the story and the legend of Luanda Magere stands out as the most recent and perhaps the most relatable. So the name Luanda means rock, and the name Magere has two meanings. So if you take the root of the word Magere to be Gero, it means the one that builds. But if you take the root of the word to be Ger, it means the fierce one. So Luanda Magere could be translated as the fierce rock. So Luanda Magere was a fierce warrior, and according to modern historians, they date his birth to the year 1720. And Luanda Magere was born of the man called Abonyo Ward Omolo, and the mother was Nyambera. As is in all stories that are told of great men, unfortunately, the mother always dies in childbirth, and Nyambera had a very difficult childbirth with Luanda Magere. Witch doctors, many medicine men came to assist the mother, but they could not save the mother's life. The only life that they could save was the life of Luanda Magere. But something special happened during that process. Luanda Magere, in his first battle, it was discovered that actually he was invincible. Swords, arrows, everything, spears could not penetrate through his skin. And in his clan, the Sido clan, which still exists and occupies a large part of the Nandi escarpment, used to revere him as the greatest warrior that had ever walked across the Luo community. And the people whom the Luo fought against were the Nandi. So the Nandi is another large tribe in Kenya. So these two communities roughly are equal in population. And they used to fight over just the common things. For example, property, cattle rustling is still going on in Kenya, but no longer between the Nandi and the Luo. Now it is between other sub-tribes. But predominantly, the wars between the Luo and the Nandi were fought over cattle. So the Luo folklore tells us that Luanda Magere realized that he was powerful, and he became so adept at warfare that he could go himself into Nandi community and capture livestock, and no one would even dare to accost him. He would walk with his spear and his shield and command people of the Nandi to hand over their livestock. And they would do it because if they dared resist, Luanda Magere would execute hundreds of them at once. So such was the power of Luanda Magere. So tired of being killed in battle by Luanda Magere, the Nandi sat down and decided that they needed to make peace. So they decided to, as a token of peace, to offer to Luanda Magere their most beautiful maiden, who went by the name Marianne. Marianne was very intelligent, and she was endowed with certain physical characteristics that Luanda Magere thought were irresistible. The elders of the Luo community warned Luanda Magere not to take Marianne as a wife. But by merely looking at her, Luanda Magere was completely disarmed. And so he took her hand in marriage. Now, what Luanda Magere did not know was that This was a ploy by the Nandi community. The Nandi had gotten tired of being defeated in war by the Luo, and Marianne had actually been sent to the community as a spy to find out what is it that makes Luanda Magere so powerful, so invincible. What made him so great? Because rumor had it that the reason he was so powerful was the mere fact that he was God's creation. And amongst the Nandi, cows are sacred animals. They indicate great wealth and blessing from God. So the Nandi had thought that if anyone really can walk up to them, and remember the Nandi were fierce warriors in their own right, if anyone can walk up to them and take their cattle, they must be God sent. But still, there's some people who could not live with this idea. So they hatched a little ploy in the name of peace and reconciliation. And Marianne was to be the Trojan horse of this endeavor. So the goal was to find out how to defeat Luanda Magere. So one night, when Luanda Magere fell sick, his first wife was not there to treat him. So he ordered for the second wife, who was now Marianne, to be brought to him to treat him. So Marianne tried to cut through Luanda Magere's skin with many things, but she could not succeed. And in exasperation, Luanda Magere told her, cut the shadow and put the medicine there. But she could not imagine it. She asked, what? The shadow? Yes, cut the shadow. And she attempted it. And with a nice little blade, she made a tiny incision where Luanda Magere had pointed at. And to her surprise, the shadow started to bleed. And that is where she applied the medicine. And during the process, she realized that she had finally found the weakness of Luanda Magere. So doubling back, the Nandi were fierce warriors during the night, but the Dholuo or the Luo were fierce warriors during the day. So that night, having discovered the weakness of Luanda Magere, Marianne ran off into the darkness and back to her community. They were neighbors, so this did not take a long while. And she told the elders what she had discovered, that the weakness of Luanda Magere lay in his shadow. But now remember, the Nandi were fierce warriors in the night. So without thinking, the word spread that Luanda Magere was not invincible, and they all just got up with their weapons and rushed into the villages of the Luo. And they were slaughtered in the thousands, because everyone, man, woman, and child, who had heard that Luanda Magere was invincible, took part in this retaliation. So many were murdered that night. And it reached a point where they just decided to turn back and flee. But that was in the early morning. And one of the soldiers had remembered what Marianne had said. And you should remember that in the morning and in the evening is when your shadow is longest. So one of the warriors remembered that Luanda Magere's weakness is in his shadow. And he ran as he was fleeing up the highest hill, turned back and threw his spear at the shadow of Luanda Magere. As usual, Magere, knowing his own invincibility, did not even bother to duck, but he stood holding his spear as is depicted in the image behind me, and waited for the spear to bounce off his skin. But the weapon hit true, and Luanda Magere's shadow was struck. The agony that penetrated through the air that morning was one that has remained in legend till today. Magere let out a very blood-curdling cry and disappeared from the battlefield. Strong winds blew over the land, the escarpment that is occupied by these two communities, for days. There was intense cloud cover for at least 3 days. When the elders were asleep, they could see Luanda Magere in their dreams. And he appeared to all of them, trying to tell them where he lied and where he lay. So Luanda Magere told them that he was still alive at a particular spot and that they should come and treat him. But when they went there, they found that he was already dead, and there was a huge rock that stood at the death place of Luanda Magere. And to this day, that rock is still celebrated as one of the cultural sites of the Luo. And if you ever visit Kenya, you will find it. And there are interesting cultural myths around the rock of Luanda Magere. Pregnant women are still not allowed to visit it for some reason. And people say that the rock has magical powers. If you visit it and you pray to it at a particular time of trouble, your tribulations will find solution. That is the story of Luanda Magere, the legend of the Dholuo. Thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, Itunu, you're muted.
Basically, I said, thank you so much for the story. It was great. Does anyone have any questions? And if so, just feel free to unmute yourself and just like speak. We'll probably, yeah. If no one wants to speak, they can just like send it to me and I'll say it.
Hi, sorry, can you put the name of the character in the chat so I can like Google and find out more about them? Thank you.
I chose this story because often we are criticized by some people that Africa does not have legends. Yeah, we know of, Superman, Batman, all these legends, but although we are inundated by these stories from the West, our cultures are rich in stories about great men and women who are powerful in their own right and whose stories have been immortalized through oral traditions. So this is a story that somehow is the rebuttal to that question that we always hear, that how come we don't have African superheroes? Yeah.
So is Luanda Magere, is he seen as a good guy or a bad guy? Because at first I thought he was a good guy, but then he seems to like kill a bunch of people as well. So
it depends. To the Luo, he's a good guy because to the community in which he belonged, he was the answer to the wars that they had to face. So these two communities, the Luo and the Nandi, lived side by side. And because of the greed of their elders, they would command, the young men to go steal cattle from either side. So to the Luo, he was a good guy. But to the Nandi, oh, hell no. He was bad news. He could tell his brothers to go home and he would handle the war by himself. Yeah, so that's how bad he was. Yeah.
And also, do you know when about this was set? It sounds very similar to the story of like Samson and Delilah in the Bible. So whether like, I don't know, inspiration was taken from it, from like the Bible, or whether it was set before like the Bible times and Samson and Delilah and things like that.
Yes, there is that similarity. So in literature, perhaps maybe in the larger field of psychology, there are ideas called archetypes. These archetypes permeate through multiple cultures, and they represent unique ideas that are fundamental to all human beings. So there are many archetypes, and in my opinion, since this story is set in 1720, this predates the time when the missionaries brought Christianity to Kenya. No, the earliest is in the 1800s. So I believe that this story is uniquely Dholuo, but it is in a family of similar stories that exist throughout the world. If you look at also Greek mythology, the Norse mythology, you will find stories where men have their demise at the hands of women. There is even a quote that says, I forget by whom, one of these writers, they say that no books can contain the agonies that men have faced in the hands of women. So, so while it is similar to the story of Samson and Delilah, it is uniquely Dholuo. Yeah, as it is unique to all other human societies. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Now we're going to be moving on to Chilombo, who's going to talk about Queen Nzinga Mbande, who was an African warrior that united the kingdom. So Chilombo, anytime you're ready, please take the stage.
All right. Oops. Hi, everyone. Hi, it's good to see you all. Really excited to be a part of this. Thanks a lot, ASCU and Cynthia, for asking me to do this. So happy Black History Month, everyone. And I hope you're all having a good month in spite of everything that's going on. Today, we also celebrate Zambia's independence, 56 years of independence. So something to celebrate somehow. So I don't know about you guys, but when I was growing up, my grandmother used to tell us a lot of stories, and usually would be sat on the floor around the fire. And she was, I think, one of the best storytellers I've ever met. And so in honor of that, I'm sat on the floor myself, not around the fire, but with a lamp in front of me for lighting. So hopefully I do her proud. So the story of Nzinga Mbande is quite inspiring, and for a very long time I've been drawn to her bravery. That's why I decided to share it today. Some of you may have heard of her, some of you not. She actually was a real woman, lived many years ago in the 16th century. And she's a hero, or I consider her a hero, not only because you know, she stands on various platforms as a statue today in Angola, but because of her courage and bravery, and also her strong will and badass attitude with which she did what she did. She won a number of battles against all odds. So just as a background, Queen Nzinga was born in Dongo in 1583 in what is today known as Angola. So throughout her adult life, she battled slave trade, as well as European rule. So her story is a mix of fact and fiction, but all in all, to me, it's all inspiring and a story of courage, wisdom, and a lot of intelligence and astuteness that she showed in her dealings with some of the colonists. So legend has it that when she was born, she had her umbilical cord around her neck, and this was believed at the time that she was destined to be a leader, proud and powerful. And now Nzinga was born at a time when the nation was divided. Her father was king of the Ndongo, King Kiluanji, one half of Angola's divided country. And while growing up, Nzinga was aware of her father's rule, and she became interested in the struggle with Ndongo's enemies, who were the Congo. And her father took her with him when he went to war. And also during this time, the Portuguese were negotiating with Nzinga's father to arrange a slave trade. Now, King Kiluanji was negotiating to ensure that his people were spared slavery. But after King Kiluanji's death, the Portuguese did not feel compelled to keep their end of the bargain. And so they threw King Kiluanji's successor, that's Nzinga's brother, in jail, and they took control of the kingdom. And this is where Nzinga's courage manifests. She's said to have gone to the Portuguese governor to not only demand her brother's release, but to put an end to slave trade. One of the most profound stories about Nzinga comes from this encounter with the Portuguese governor. So during this encounter, the governor refused to offer Nzinga a seat. Nzinga understood her place as a leader and also as a ruler. And she thought about the optics of sitting on the mat and looking up to a European as they spoke. And so she decided that, she had 50 servants serving her at any one time. And she asked one of them to get down on all fours and create a seat for her. So this way, Queen Nzinga negotiated with the colonists eyeball to eyeball without having to take a much lower position. And after the negotiations, the story goes that Nzinga asked the servant to get up and slit her throat in front of the governor. Of course, like I said, some of this is fact and fiction, but this story goes around quite a lot, this bit of the story. So she is said to have done this in order to show her power. It may be violent and gruesome, but it seemed to have worked because the governor immediately agreed to release Nzinga's brother. And after his release, Nzinga's brother died immediately. Another bit of is it fact or fiction is that he committed suicide after seeing the state of the country and the continued warfare with the Portuguese. But others say that Nzinga killed him herself in order to ascend to the throne. And she's also said to have killed his son, who would have succeeded his father. Regardless, Nzinga became queen of the Ndongo in 1624 at 41 years old. Like I said, Nzinga was very smart, one of the things about her that inspires me. And she realized that in order to achieve peace with the Portuguese and for her kingdom to remain viable, she needed to become an intermediary. So she allied the Ndongo with Portugal, and as a condition of their agreement, she had to convert to Christianity. She was baptized as Ana de Souza Nzinga Mbande, with the Portuguese colonial governor serving as her godfather. Very smart, if you ask me. So by doing this, she acquired a partner in her fight against her African enemies and also ending Portuguese slave raids in Ndongo Kingdom. Sadly, this alliance did not last very long because the Portuguese betrayed Ndongo in 1626, and Nzinga was forced to flee when war broke out. She took over as ruler of a nearby kingdom called Matamba, and she captured that kingdom's queen, that's Queen Mwongo Matamba, and she also took over her army. Nzinga then made Matamba her capital, joining it to the kingdom of Ndongo. She hoped that she would defeat the Portuguese or at least negotiate a peace treaty from this new colony. And from this base, she began lobbying for the kingdom to take refugees from the slave trade. She also attempted a number of times, and many times by force, to cut off slave trade routes. And her guerrilla warfare against the Portuguese lasted 30 years. Her army consisted of escaped slaves, rebel soldiers, and quite a number of women. And also she took advantage of those who ran away from the Portuguese military. And at this time also, the Europeans were fighting against each other to take control of territories around the region. So Nzinga saw an opportunity make the Portuguese, the Europeans fight amongst one another. And so she created or formed an alliance with the Dutch. And she also had a 60-gun skilled group of Dutch bodyguards. So the Mbande Matamba astuteness cultivated under Queen Nzinga's leadership council made them realize that these competing interests amongst the European colonists meant that she could take advantage of their the tension that existed between them for her own strength. So Nzinga did exploit these differences and use them to defend her homeland. Like I said, she created this alliance with the Dutch because she realized that she needed their guns to fight the Portuguese and also to prevent the Portuguese expansion into Central Africa. And for a few years, Nzinga was able to defeat the Portuguese army in collaboration with the Dutch, but the Dutch did not stay in the region for a very long time. They were driven out. So Nzinga had to face the Portuguese on her own after that. She couldn't overthrow the Portuguese on her own, but she tried relentlessly to resist their rule. And she personally led troops in battle until she was 60 years old, with both sides downing tools after a long war. They just grew tired of having this spat. So she signed a peace treaty with Portugal in 1657 and spent the rest of her life rebuilding the country. And for the last decade of Nzinga's life, and even after her death in 1663, the kingdom of Ndongo avoided European colonialism. Now, Queen Nzinga was a relentless champion of human rights and defender of African dignity. Her arms fought valiantly against the barbaric practice of slavery with the Portuguese, which the Portuguese wanted to instill on African people, and her action actually held off expansion into Central Africa. The military strategies that she employed reflected Nzinga as a skilled military general. And with Nzinga's rule, Matamba, as well as Ndongo, became a powerful kingdom that long resisted Portuguese colonialism attempts and was only integrated in Angola in the late 19th century. So today, Queen Nzinga is celebrated across Africa and is known as an intelligent diplomat and visionary military ruler. She symbolizes Angola's independence and has numerous statues to commemorate her legacy. I share this story because she inspires me so much, and also my grandmother, who I admire as well, comes from Angola, so it's quite fitting for me to share this story. For those of you who would like to hear more or learn more about Nzinga, there's a video, a whole movie about her. The full movie is available on YouTube. I will just quickly share the trailer, if that's all right, so that you can have a look at it and be inspired by Nzinga. So just a minute while I pull this up. Okay, I hope y'all can see that. Am I sharing my screen? Yeah, okay. Okay, there you go.
Assassinos! É Tuluca que foi. Calma, Cambo! Angola, mas depois está morto! O papá morreu pelo chão do Ndongo. Honrou o sangue dos nossos antepassados.
Acha que eles podem me trair?
Acho que o seu herdeiro deve continuar vivo. E os umbigos dos outros devem ser todos enterrados no chão.
Mbande não tem força nem inteligência para vencer a guerra contra os portugueses. Eu vou lá estar para defender o meu povo quando Mbande cair. Fala só, Mbande. Que pedido é esse?
Preciso que vás a Luanda tratar a paz com o irmão dele.
M. Eu?
Sim. Tu és a mocusa de Angola, Nzinga. Nosso pai teria escolhido a ti para esta missão.
O reino do ndongo é soberano. Não pode ser vassalo de outro. Ndongo Xiame, nossa terra, herança dos nossos antepassados. Eu lhe honro e lhe respeito e vou lutar por ela até vencer.
Manalaí, Maiai, da que me queres aqui, Zinga?
Para defender o nosso desejo.
Pelo poder que me é dado por El Rei de Portugal, para essa ginga, uma principal inimiga do reino português. Reúna todas as tropas que conseguir e marcho contra ela. Quero a cabeça de ginga e eu vou entregar-lhe uma salva de prata.
Os portugueses me traíram, me perseguiram, roubaram o nosso chão.
E não se vá. Ela estava lá escutando para nos informar.
A guerra só nos tem prejudicado. As peças escravas diminuíram. Não conseguimos encher as caravelas para enviar para o Brasil.
Qual é a proposta?
Nós não vos atacamos e vocês não nos atacam.
Mas para podermos honrar esse trato, vamos ter de eliminar a ginga.
Façam com Zinga o que quiserem.
Eu vou dar luta aos meus inimigos até a eternidade. Não vou perdoar mais a vida a nenhum português.
Mas que modos são esses com a princesa? Os portugueses empurraram Zinga para fora do trono de Ndongo, mas os espíritos estão com ela. O trono pertence a Zinga. Nenhum vivo, nenhum morto pode nada contra isso.
All right, thanks a lot, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chilombo, for the story and the trailer. It was super interesting. If anyone is interested, maybe Chilombo would feel free to share the YouTube link in the chat, please. Yeah, that's great. So next we have Tanya, who's gonna talk about hair. So yeah, anytime you feel free. Thank you.
Don't we have questions from the previous one?
Oh, sorry. Does anyone have any questions?
We got some questions on the chat. I mean, you want to check that.
Someone asked for the movie title, please.
Okay, just bring it up just now.
Sabia tratar de uma criança especial. Yungoda faria as suas melhores suspeitas confirmadas quando Zinga se transformou numa mulher diferente das outras. Filha extremosa. Madre carinho orgulhosa.
So the title was Nzinga, Reina de Angola. Chika asked, are there moral lessons peculiar with this story among Angolans?
I think it's basically a story of courage and bravery and resistance of colonial rule at the time. So Nzinga, like I said, Nzinga in English, if you will, is considered a hero, especially when you consider the time that she grew up, and there was a bit of opposition to female rule at the time, even though many African countries, many African cultures, especially in Angola, consider or come from a matrilineal society, but still there was a lot of resistance to women ruling, especially going into battle and taking on some of the guerrilla fights that we've seen Nzinga taking on. So it's about the bravery, the courage, and also the intelligence that she exhibited in her dealings with the colonialists as well.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Does anyone have any more questions? Great. Yeah, so Tanya's now going to talk to us about hair. So if you'd like to take the stage, please.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Hi, guys. I'm Tanya, and I'm going to talk about something slightly different, which is hair. Happy. Yeah, so like, it's quite different from the stories we've been hearing. They're more like, this is going to be more like a bit of hair education a bit, but I'm not going to go into much detail. And I was hoping at the end of the session, we could have a tiny discussion about how we feel about the topic in general. So before slave trade, before colonialism, hair in Africa was seen like, it had many like purposes. It was seen to like raise your status in the society, your age, your tribe. There are so many like things associated to hair, and there's so many hairstyles and so many people who actually focused on grooming of African hair. And then when slavery and colonialism started, the first thing that happened was when people were moved from Africa to the States, or like during slave trade, the hair history was actually forgotten about how to actually groom natural hair, how to actually style. And this was done in a way to kind of like remove or dissociate African people from where they actually come from their roots. As a result, slaves their hair was cut short basically, so that they couldn't actually go hair which was seen as nappy, or if they had their natural hair, they had no proper care for it or any knowledge how to do their hair. It was usually shaved off. And then here back home in like Africa, in general, like this is a very generalization. Natural hair was seen as unkept. This also happened again in people who were taken abroad as slaves, and people started straightening their hair. So there were many techniques, but the first one, which I grew up hearing about a lot, was using a hot stone and on another stone, and people lying on the stone and actually like using a hot stone to kind of like perm their hair straighter so that they could have that proximity to whiteness that would make them more acceptable to society. In slave owners, or like in slave homes, they were either cutting off their hair or wearing wigs so that they look like their master, which was mostly for the men, or the women were seen as would required to plait their hair. So throughout the ages, the history of what happens or how we actually use our hair or like plait our hair or prepare our hair was lost. That is the first one. And secondly, we kind of like started using other techniques that are closer to like white hair and closer to what the colonial rule actually wanted us to look like. And this also applies to other things like the way we talk or like the way we dress. Like there's a lot of other things that it's just not hair, but I just chose hair. Later on, when emancipation occurred and people started having the freedom they had, black hair was actually now seen as like, if you keep your afro hair, you're actually kind of like not accepting the social norms in life. So if you don't want to be successful, then keep your natural hair, do not straighten it. Whereas if you want to be successful, then you have to like slick back your hair. And we see this uprising mostly when there was like the empowerment, where people like actively wanted to wear their hair and was just seen as a political statement for just being their natural selves. Back home, and this time as well, the relaxer came into play, as we all know. And I grew up like on the relaxer. And back home, I'm from Zimbabwe. At this point, everyone was just like relaxing their hair or plaiting it if you're a child, so that you could be accepted as who you are. And this has happened up to now, and now we can see that we're moving towards more wigs, weaves, braids. And this is again to have that proximity to what people think is beautiful or acceptable in society, which that's the case. And at the other end, we still have relaxers or straightening that also like kind of like reimpose that as a Black woman with your natural hair, you're not celebrated as you are. In around 2010, there was like a natural hair movement where like everyone was like, okay, we've had enough. Let's celebrate our actual natural hair. And most of you like are aware, the hair that was celebrated was the 4C hair, no, not the 4C hair, the 4A, 4B, or 3B hair, where there were looser curl textures, and it was again seen as exotic, but not too far from what the mainstream or like white beauty standards are. And as a person who has like really kinky 4C hair, and as many of the women like in this group would actually like acknowledge, we spend so much time trying to get our hair to like conform to the standard of beauty that is actually like accepted right now, or we cover it up in braids, which is kind of weird. But that is how things have been up to date. And it's kind of like not a real story, but I just wanted to like kind of like give a very brief overview of what happened, where we are right now, and what is happening right now when it comes to hair, and why it's like very difficult for someone to actually like celebrate their real hair. Like, for example, personally, it's hard to actually know the history of where exactly the things that I use to actually make my hair look nice, or even if I do have the styles, it's very hard to actually be accepted in society with them, because it doesn't only affect the way I look, it also affects how I'm actually associated with people in the society, and actually affects your success to some level. And then at the same time, when you do actually like wear your natural hair, which at times I actually do, you become kind of like something that people actually look at, because it's not the norm, or if it is not looking what it should, or people think it should look like as black hair, it becomes kind of like really a talking point. And yeah, I just wanted to like take this opportunity to just talk a bit about black hair, and like hopefully have a discussion about how we feel about the topic in general. So that's it. If anyone has like a suggestion, comment, or just something to add on, all ears.
I just wanted to comment, like, it's quite interesting. First of all, this was amazing. Thank you. It's interesting how like the mainstream is white. It's like, I just get frustrated by how like the norm is what's white. And it's like, how is that the norm? And it's like, for background, I'm from Kenya. And it's like, how did the norm become white? Like, how did we program ourselves to, I know this is just a, like, there's nothing that comes out of this, but yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's kind of like really weird, because everything that we actually do, the norm is wherever you actually come from, the norm is usually white. Whether it's like education level, the way you speak, the way everything comes under like and of course everything came like this because of like colonialism and slave trade and everything like that. And it's kind of really hard when you look at about it and think, where can I actually kind of get my identity from, when even from a point of view of hair is been like covered up. So at the end, it's very hard to like be like no, against like, or not always fall under the norm, which is white, because for a long time that's all we've known. Our history was washed away. So like it's a very difficult, like even though like for most of us who have very kinky hair, when we wanted to join like the natural hair movement, we just did not have a frame of reference of what we're talking about. Not even my grandmother grew up with like natural hair. She had to straighten it to like look like closer to whiteness. So it's very difficult to like we know how it came along, but it's very difficult to not just fall for it, because that's mostly what we've known.
So sorry, my idea is quite a bit twisted to the left or to the right. I mean, it's not in the middle. But then I enjoy your story saying colonialism and how these guys were able to erode the African culture, which is rich in strength, by the first storyteller and the second storyteller. And then this is your story trying to integrate the two, which I find quite very interesting. But my question is, how are we trying to bring back this history? For instance, I'm going to ask, how many of us endeavor to learn our dialect, I mean, our country language? I don't know. As much as we want to learn French, Russian, Chinese, and probably the English, the Queen's English. So, I mean, this story was, the two stories were said in English language without any recourse to the potential language structure or the potential language theme that makes this story stand out. So do you think we're still going to decolonize if we focus so much on these core languages? based on what you just said.
I'm not actually getting like your answer, but your question, but I'll like try to answer a couple of things that you say there. The first thing was, have you ever thought about learning your mother tongue? Okay, my mother tongue is like what I with Shona is like my first language. English is like acquired on top of that, right? And then at the same time, I see a lot of Black British people who were born here who never had grew up like in another country coming here. Like, would you be willing to actually learn your mother dialect or anything? There's a lot of disinterest, mostly because if they learn Zulu or Xhosa, what are they going to do with that for their career? Most people learn a language for their career, except people who are actually interested in languages. Then you actually do see some interest. And I understand where they're coming from. You cannot always like kind of fight and want to have a culture that nobody really knows. And going back, there's kind of like, it's kind of like one of those is like, I really don't feel like I belong. At the same time, I don't fit anywhere. So it's very difficult. So it's a very difficult question to answer for everyone else. I don't know how many people actually like kind of feel that. The second question you asked is like, how do we move forward, or like how do we deal with this so that we can actually like capture our culture? For me, I am not like a social scientist or a historian, but I do wish a lot of more people were actually kind of granted the access to actually actively research and actually give insight into the history of Black people, and actually Black people doing it, not white people doing it. And if you look in Cambridge, for example, Center for African Studies is headed by white people. Most people in there are white people, and they're also interested in a lot of topics that are more white-centered than actually for Africans. So the way to do this, obviously there are African universities, but also like in the UK, for the talks like this to be led by people who come from African nations or who have a tie or a link that is more than just them being interested in the subject. Does that answer your questions?
You know, well, I think you know, you provided your own thought. It's more like a provocation more than just a question, because for me, it's not just about me comparing myself with the white person or me trying to make them understand my true story the way I want them to, because it's about what my story stands for and the true meaning of my story to me. I'm not trying to make my story look real to them. Just the way they wouldn't want me to accept Batman or Spider-Man the way I want to. Okay, so I think more for me, an African story is understood by the African person, and maybe a little bit tweeted for the white man because they don't understand the narratives. I mean, look at the first story that talked about, I've forgotten the name of the person, and they said this guy is invisible. To the white man, that's the illusion. But to the African person, this is real, okay? So I feel our stories, probably they should be more documented, just the way, you know, these two, the first two stories we had, probably if we document them, we record them this way, we share them, probably people are going to listen more and they could understand more better. But one thing I want to state frankly is I'm not trying to let my African story be heard by the white man, okay, and then be taken the way I want them to take it, because obviously they are not going to understand it, because there are so many myths, so many things that they cannot conceive with their psychological makeup. Okay, so that's just my thought on that.
That's good. Cynthia, the question?
Yeah. Thank you very much for the wonderful story. So to respond to Chika's point, I kind of see like what you mean and where you're coming from. You know, and I've kind of heard those things about languages as well. I think that's always very tricky because there's so many cultures and every culture has a language. I mean, if you look at Nigeria alone, there's like 200. So there's always going to be that question of which language, you know, do we use to communicate, and there'll always be that problem of like, you know, if we choose one person's language, what does that mean for everybody else? But then also just like within this context, right, you know, we're all from different nationalities here. I mean, if Tanya told her story in Shona, nobody was going to understand anything she said. So in a way as well, you know, having this common language allows us as well, you know, who are non-whites to also like understand and share and participate. So, I mean, they're different sides. But the question I wanted to ask Tanya, going back to hair, is, you know, there's been, you talked about natural hair movement, and I think it's actually been growing a lot, like, stronger and stronger, like, every time. And even like recently, I've just seen so many like businesses popping up and about with natural hair care products, and like, you know, everyone with their YouTube vlogs doing all these things about natural hair routines and everything. So I think there's like the movement is only growing stronger. So like for you, do you see that anytime soon it will become a norm for natural hair?
Like I totally say, maybe in like 10 years time it will be like seen as, because people are actually talking about it. But it's kind of disheartening, because when you see people, there's kind of like the same thing, like, you know, we are talking about African hair, but within that African hair there's like kind of like grades. The same way there's colorism in that there's like grades of which is accepted, which is not. And it's really frustrating when you see that the most vocal things that are being said about natural hair or good natural hair is not what most of me and my friends actually have. So there will be progress. Most people will be seen with like more African hair, and it won't be as discriminated as much. But it's quite frustrating when you have like a daily life where you have to be like, okay, so we have to wait our turn, but our turn, you know, we have to wait quite a bit longer than other people, just because, you know, it doesn't fit the kind of like the make of what people are celebrating right now. And it's kind of sad because although we are making progress, I don't think it's kind of involving everyone who's like included, if that makes sense. So yeah, we're making progress, but you know, foresee here, you know, out here. But yeah. There was someone else who had a question or a comment.
I just wanted to comment about like the language thing. Fortunately or unfortunately, like the white person has managed to make English the only unifying language that like combines all of us to be able to communicate. And like, can we change that? Maybe in the long term, but for now it's like, it's a bit sad, but like none of us would understand each other if like I was speaking in Arabic or Swahili, someone else was speaking from like different languages, like it just wouldn't work. But hopefully we can change that. Maybe we can make an amalgam of all languages, but that dilutes everything else. But yeah.
But
yeah.
I was gonna say, I can't remember what it's called now, but when Arik said, oh, if we come up with our own language, I feel like in Nigeria, we tried, like I was not involved, but I think my dad told me that this tried to happen, and I'm trying to I might have to like dip off and go Google it and then come back with the actual word. But so yeah, in Nigeria, there are like 3, I don't want to say main tribes because then that makes it seem like the other tribes aren't main, but like let's say 3 larger tribes, which is Yoruba, Igbo, and Hausa. And then it was going to be like a combination of those 3. But then everyone was like, well, then what happens to the other like 297 tribes? So then I guess there's that as well. And I don't know what happens to that. I don't think it happened because I've never heard it. And my dad just said it like in passing at some point, but that just like triggered that memory.
I think like in Kenya, we're lucky that we have Swahili. That's like a combining factor. And then all tribal languages still exist. So you can still communicate within that. But yeah, I don't know how we can fix this.
But then I think even if you think from like a dialect point of view, so yeah, I was kind of going on this chick about Nigerian and Pidgin English. So my like family, if we go like origins is like from Delta Warri, but then like my mom like grew up in Lagos, even though like her like family's from Delta as well, but they will tell you that the Pidgin there is very different. So like Pidgin Warri, like you're not gonna understand it if you're not from Warri compared to like everywhere else in Lagos. Like Pidgin Warri is just a different kind essentially. So even when it comes to dialects, not just in Nigeria but across the world, in the UK, I remember being on a phone call to someone and I had to get like my white friend to translate because this person was apparently speaking English, but it wasn't an English I've heard. I was very confused.
It's probably up north.
And you've got like the dialects and accents and how that like changes things, or just like common phrases and like I think it has a swear word, so I might not say it, but something about like paddling up like something's creek with a paddle. I was like, what does that even mean? And it's like in English, but I don't know what that phrase means, even though it's still like English and I understand the English language. So from like region to region, there might be other phrases that people like have, and how does that get across, even though it's the same language, but you need to understand like the meaning of it.
That's true. Just to add on to that, I don't think we kind of really appreciate how large and diverse Africa is. And like the first time like I kind of totally understood this was like if you like take the world map and get it across the actual sizes, and then you like look at the little tribes that are everywhere. Africa is very diverse, very rich in culture that already has been whitewashed. Yes, some of it might be there, but again, we have so much differences within. We have so much in common, but so many differences within us. That it would be very, very hard to get like one common, like, I mean, it's kind of like combining like the whole of Europe plus the UK plus then some and try to get one language without colonialism. So yeah, it would be very, very difficult. Yeah.
Sorry. If I could make a comment on that. I think the problem is trying to call 54 countries plus one entity. I mean, like looking at 54 countries and saying Africa. So it devalues and demeans 54 countries. So you're like, Africa, yeah, it's just somewhere there. And I mean, I was speaking to someone last week and I said I was going to do something on African countries. And say, yeah, go ahead. It's going to be quite simple. And I said, it's 54 countries plus one. So pretty much people don't know it's 54 countries. So I think one of the way we can start to, go down with the decolonization is to be telling people, listen, I am from Nigeria, and in Africa, we have 54 countries. And if we're going to do, this hairstyle is from Nigeria, West Africa, okay? And this hairstyle is from this part, East Africa or Southern Africa. And then we can begin to tell people how rich this culture is, not just one entity, Africa. And I think it's also common to we that are from Africa, the way we call it Africa. I'm from Africa. So Ghanaian is my friend, Lesotho is my friend, Mauritius is my friend, and we're just close to each other. Whereas these 54 countries are even much more than Europe as a whole. Yeah, I don't know.
That is very true. I mean, yeah, as much as we have shared experiences and an overall story to tell, for example, when it comes to hair, to skin color, to like colorism and stuff like that, there is so much richness in there. And going back to like hair, that's why like, there's like one standard for like beautiful black hair, but there's so much more that could be done in there. And that's why to like open up this conversation, like we just lost it because it was literally like what, like the like white people, like it has to be straight. We have so much that we lost in culture and in history and in like even methodology of how to do things. And maybe that will be the way to actually be like, okay, if you're from like, for example, Zimbabwe, what did they do in here? Like, honestly, I would not have a clue because all I know is my grandmother told me like her mom just used to like straighten her hair. So that is, I don't even have anyone beyond my grandmother to ask that. So how do we get this knowledge back again? I would have no clue. But yeah.
I hate to pause the discussion because it's really nice to see everyone engaged, but we will have space for more discussion towards the latter end of the event. But if no one has any more comments right now, we'll move on to Ari, who's going to talk to us about Cairo, Eldoret, and Cambridge. So yeah, thank you.
Hi. Okay, I've moved you to this screen so that I'm actually looking at you now. Hi, everyone. So first of all, I wanted to thank Cynthia for reaching out to me and being like, hey, do you want to say a story? But in classic Cambridge procrastination, when she asked me for a title, I was like, I thought of this, engineers and their screens, thank you. I thought of this, basically, I think my dad once told me, like, you're from a few places, Cairo, Eldoret, and Cambridge. Why don't you write an autobiography? That sounds very vain, and I'm not going to do that. But I was like, title of a story. So I guess this is going to be just like me trying to talk about the differences and similarities between the places I come from. So a bit of background. My parents are Egyptian. So I was born in Cairo. Actually, my mom's Jordanian, but we'll ignore that. And then I've lived my whole life in Eldoret, which is home of champions. Every marathon runner who's ever won a marathon, our town. And then Cambridge, which I weirdly now call home. Like, I've been in Cambridge for 3 years. I'm doing my 4th year of engineering. And given it's my only home in the UK, it's become a home of some sort. Shay, stuff the faces, please. And yeah, I think when I Googled Cairo, Eldoret, Cambridge, that the first thing that came up was Cambridge Universal College Eldoret, which is like near the hospital, near one of the hospitals in LD. There's Cambridge Universal College, and it's actually a thing. And before I knew what Cambridge was, there was that. And then I also found Cambridge Primary English. There was Cambridge Primary English in Cairo, which is the school. And then someone was offering me a flight deal from Cambridge to Eldoret. I opened the link and there was nothing. I was like, yeah, that looks about right. And yeah, so when I was thinking about this, I tried to think of like what links the 3 places. And I actually found the answer in my Freshers Week. So I came here as a fresher. First of all, if you're international African, you come here and the first thing you notice is the cold. Like, what is happening here? I'm just like, what is wrong with this place? Why is it so cold? Like, personally back home, both in Kenya and Egypt, when people wear a scarf around their neck, it's like, you know, you're chic, you're cool. You have money so you can buy the cool scarves. You wear the leather jacket, but you don't really need it. And then I come here and the air touches my neck and I'm like, Allah, okay. Okay, this is different. Now I see why we need woolen scarves around the neck. But yeah, I digress. So in Freshers Week, there were 2 things. First of all, I came here for international freshers and I didn't find anyone. And like, I was the only undergrad from Kenya to make it to Cambridge in my year. So there was no one else like from a similar background. I didn't know of any Egyptians coming here. It was like, okay, I'm on my own. And then, so on my first night in college, what I went and did was, I like people, so I went knocking on doors. This was pre-COVID time, so that was still okay. I could go still see people. And I went knocking on doors and no one opened because there weren't many internationals around. But then one person opened and her name's Afia. I don't know if you guys have met her. She just graduated. So Afia from Ghana. And we chatted for like 3 hours that night. We realized she was in Nairobi, like part of her life. She was from Ghana, but she had lived in Kenya for a bit. And we chatted and bonded about that. We bonded about how weird the weather here is, how cold British people seem to be when you first meet them, things like that. Sorry for the generalizations. And it was like, right now we were just saying like Africa is not one thing, but in a way, just the sense, even a far sense of familiarity. I don't think I had ever met a Ghanaian before in my life, but automatically Afia felt like home because we could bond about Kenya. We could bond about how different this place was. And yeah, I guess that's where I found my link between Cambridge and Eldoret. And then my link between Cambridge and Cairo came when it was still Freshers Week. I was going up the stairs in my building with my parents and we met a girl and my mom stopped her. She was like, "You look Arab." She was like, "Oh, actually, I'm half French, half Algerian." I'm like, "Mom, oh my goodness, you don't ask these questions over here." And then the first question my mom asked her was, "Are you Muslim or Christian?" And I'm like, "Oh my goodness, Mom." And like my friend was like, "No particular religion," and that's okay. But I remember my mom's look on her face of being incapable to comprehend. Like, what do you mean? Huh? What? You don't fit into one of these 2 boxes? What is happening? And like I remember that's for Shay, you know her, Chloe, actually. So yeah, and I remember being like, oh my goodness, Mom, you have embarrassed me in front of my course mate before we even met. What is happening? But funnily enough, like I'm now living with this person and we're some of the closer friends. But it's just like, I guess that was the Cairo Cambridge link of like, she's Arab. Let's clump all Arabs together into one thing. And yeah, it was just, I guess those were two incidents in my freshers week that were weirdly close to what could be home, but also not. But yeah, and I guess just fitting in here was weird because as you can tell, I'm not Black, but when I told people like I'm from Kenya, they're like, but you're not Black. I'm like, yeah, I can tell. I can be from Kenya and not be Black because my parents are Egyptian. And it was just the whole, I guess, I think being in Cambridge has made me think a lot about identity and just what, I don't know, like, because people see you and label you, like, at least that's what I feel in the UK. There's a lot of labels that are put onto you when a person sees you before they even speak to you. And they, in a way, a lot of people assume those labels are who you are. And it's just like trying to change that and trying to speak to people about, I guess, trying to bond with people. But I realized like a lot of British people that I first met were very reserved sorry if you're British, but then you realize when you start talking to people, they open up. But that was one thing I really struggled with, because at least like what I felt back home is you could ask someone, how are you? And when someone asked you, how are you? They generally meant, how are you? Like, tell me how you are. Whereas here it's like, I'm all right, thanks. And you walk past and it's like, what's happening? So yeah, yeah, this is not really a story. This was me rambling, but I guess it was just talking about my backgrounds. And also, do you know what frustrates me? Basically, when my parents moved to Kenya, I was 2 years old, so I was barely, like, I wasn't, but like, one thing that frustrates me is the divide between North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa. And just like, first of all, our Arab leaders are, let me not get started. I'm not going to swear online because it's bad manners, but it's just like, I remember my parents being told, oh, why are you going to go live in the bushes? And it's like, no, not living in the bushes. Sorry, Nairobi is more advanced than a lot of cities up in North Africa. What are you? And it's just like, it frustrates me how much people just in general have pre-assumptions about places or people or things without knowing. And like, it's okay to not know, but then don't comment about things you don't know. And I'll stop rambling and open this to discussion. I think there were a few things in the chat. Let me, my dad said that the language they wanted to make to combine Yoruba is Wazobia. Yep. And how long, someone asked me privately how long I've been here. 3 years. Like, I came here for my undergrad. But yeah, does anyone have questions or comments or anything?
I have an add-on. Hello, I didn't know you're an engineer. Hey, girl. Oh, hey.
Are you an engineer?
Yeah, PhD. Hey, girl.
Hi.
Please stand.
Okay. Shay's an engineer. Sorry for calling you out, Shay.
Oh, well, it was kind of like interesting when you mentioned that, like, coming to like the UK. This is a comment, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Coming to the UK, especially to Cambridge, people don't really are not really open or say hi, and it's really hard to integrate, especially with white people in Cambridge.
Yeah.
So I actually felt this when I came to Cambridge, and it might also be the place you are in because of like, it's quite an elitist space. Okay. So for my undergrad in Manchester, I did not have as much difficulty connecting with people as coming to Cambridge did. And I actually worry often when I find undergraduates in Cambridge, and I'm like, well, you're gonna like experience like the full force of elitism and then racial stuff. And it's quite weird when I actually like talk to like undergraduates. I'm like, well, it's not usually like this, you know. When you go up north or like to like London, like other cities, people are more open and people are more aware of their surroundings than in Cambridge. And you do not blame Cambridge students because they have been brought up in a very elitist system, majority of them. So just, you know, to add on.
Thank you.
But yeah.
And I guess me saying, like, I've been saying, like, oh, we should not generalize, but I've generalized British people to Cambridge people, which again is unfair. But yeah, it's an interesting, yeah. Someone in the chat, why is Africa divided in Sub-Saharan and North Africa? Please tell me, I have no clue. Politics is horrible. It pisses me off.
An answer for this, but I remember, so my dad used to work for like Water Aid, the charity, so Sub-Saharan Africa used to come up a lot, and I just thought that was like the part of Africa that was like near the Sahara. I guess when I was young I didn't fully grasp what sub meant, and sub means everything under it. I just thought it meant the part that, and I'm like, okay, it makes sense that, you know, you have a word to group like a couple of countries, but I'm like, how do you have a word to group an entire continent and then just exclude like 10 of the countries up the top? And I don't know if it's a racial thing, because like my friend made a joke about this one time, and I was like saying like, oh, Sub-Saharan Africa, then I put like a comment like, but Loki, I hate that term. He's like, oh, you mean Sub-Saharan Africa essentially just mean like Black Africa, essentially, because then when you like look at North Africa, the people aren't like Black racially, so then some people are like, oh, they're not really African and they should be like North Africa and the Middle East. For example, even when you go to like Asia, I don't know where, like, I guess it might be different where you are, because like, to give like a random example, I think if you go to America and you use the word Asian, their head will normally go to someone from like East Asia, but when you're in the UK and you use the term Asian, it's normally someone from South Asian. In the same way, when you're in America, you use the term brown, that means someone who's Hispanic, but when you're in the UK and you use the term brown, that means someone who's like South Asian, for example. So then I don't know whether it's that like, oh, you have to define, like, it doesn't make sense for these two different, like, completely opposite looking, whatever, kind of people to be in the same, like, group. We can't call them, be part of the same continent because they don't look alike. So we're going to have to, like, separate and have, like, Sub-Saharan Africa as, like, one, and then put, like, North Africans with, like, the Middle Easterns as an entity. But I think maybe also if you look at development work, so I, like, want to go into sustainable development, and the amount of times you see, like, SSA, as in, like, Sub-Saharan Africa, and they never just use Africa. And is it this kind of, like, poverty thing that they keep playing, that like, oh, Black people are poor, so we like put them in this different category and we call them Sub-Saharan Africa, and these are the guys who need aid work and all that kind of stuff. But then North Africa are actually doing quite well, and we can be like friendly with them and like have like oil deals and all that kind of stuff, and they're like useful into, and I'm always used to wonder why there is this separation. And I guess now my head is thinking, oh yeah, North Africa must be doing fine because they're never like included in sustainable development. It's always like Sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia, and then I'm like, no, this is just colonialism getting into my head and kind of thing. But those are just kind of like my 2 cents on maybe why there's that distinction, how that even.
I think it's very much a divide and conquer, but also there's a lot of racism between, like, Arabs are very racist to Black people, like, because Egypt has like a population of Black people, but Black Egyptians are facing tons of racism, and it's just like, it doesn't make sense. And I think politicians like digging those things deeper because, oh, us versus them. Once you have an other in any context, it's easier to divide people, I guess. But yeah, it's...
You guys have really hit the nail on the head. It revolves around the identity of the Negroid race. So the Sub-Saharan Africa is considered to be inhabited by this inferior and physiologically distinct group of people called the Negroids, who anthropologically, especially when you look at literature before the 1950s and 60s, would refer to us as underdeveloped, lacking a civilization. We don't have ingenuity and genius. These are peculiarities that are somehow deficient in the Negroid race, which are present in the north of Africa. For example, we are all aware that although these countries like Tunisia and Egypt are on the continent, and they have been in existence for thousands of years, those who were trying to write our history consider the Negroid as not part of this history. Yeah, essentially, Sub-Saharan Africa is supposed to be Africa, but anything above the Sahara all those from Morocco all the way to Egypt represent somehow a different group of people who are not Negroid. I also hate that name, Sub-Saharan Africa, because whatever it is meant to accomplish is part of the racist agenda of these groups. The history of Egypt and the history of Tunisia and the history of Morocco, these are the histories of Africa. Yeah. The physiology of the Sphinx is distinctly Negroid. That's why it was mutilated a few thousand years ago, and the nose was chiseled away so that the anatomical features of, the well-developed nose are missing from these sculptures. So if we dig into this, I'm sure we will uncover some really dark stuff.
Well,
but
like,
I appreciate.
Pharaohs were definitely at least mostly black. Like, let's not kid ourselves. It's just like, what are we talking about?
That's the weird thing.
The way it looked like this is because of all the intermarriages that happened when they colonized us. Like,
so when I learned about ancient Egypt, so I went through the British education system, and they do love their ancient Egyptians, their ancient Greeks, their Romans. They will spend all year for like 6 years telling you about that, but we'll never tell you anything about anything else. Essentially, we just do that on repeat. And I would have told you Egyptians were white in terms of the way, all the pictures I saw, their hair. I thought it was like, oh, they're like, I don't know. I didn't realize their hair was meant to be like
kinky. What, like,
when someone was just like, Egyptians are black, I'm like, huh? Because I guess it's that thing again, because if you think about the pyramids, people can't accept the fact that pyramids were built by African people. Like there was this whole ideology, and I look at it and think it's a joke, but some people honestly believe it and believed it for years, that the pyramids came from aliens because they couldn't fathom that African people could have built such. So I think maybe what they wanted to do again with this portrayal of how they like portrayed Egyptian people is again have the separation that, okay, we'll credit Egyptians for, being one of the first civilizations, but there's no way we'll credit Black people. So we're gonna repaint the picture of like what an Egyptian looks like.
Exactly.
For example.
And like, I think the use of sub-Saharan Africa, the fact that all like humanitarian aid or development is aimed at sub-Saharan Africa is to ingrain that thing that it's Black people that are in need of help. Your sub, even like the use of sub, come on, it's just like, come on, you can't make it more obvious. But, and I'm sorry, poverty rates in Egypt are horrible. Kwani, I don't know what you're talking about. The economy is not thriving. We also have our own dictators killing their people. It's the same story everywhere.
I was researching, I was confused.
And Sudan has more pyramids than Egypt. Amen.
Yeah. Just to add on to that as well, when you're mentioning pyramids, a lot of people don't know, like, okay, everyone, I guess, has an example from their country, but in Zimbabwe, there's Great Zimbabwe or Zimbabwe. It's actually a very impressive archaeological achievement. Like the architecture was beautiful. It was destroyed during colonialism, but again, it's as if the idea with like African countries or like in Sub-Sahara in general, or if just in Africa, is that before colonialism there was nothing. That is like the main thing that they do. But if you actually look at some of the history books that we had some very beautiful stuff or some very amazing buildings, but most of them were destroyed or like the artifacts were taken and then taken to museums abroad. So all these things exist and we did do them, and then they're just like kind of like washed under because, we can't possibly do that because that will make us more human.
Yeah, sorry. Let me say, this history I've been reading, and Africa have this idea of giving history by just word of mouth rather than documentation, which is what most of us grew up with. Parents sit you down, tell you a story about Nzinga. Martin, I forgot the name of that guy you mentioned. The guy was so interesting. Now, sorry, you want to mention his name?
Yeah, Luanda Magere.
Yeah, Luanda Magere. These are stories, if you're not careful, you won't have them documented. They just tell it to you. And one study that is quite interesting is the working memory of the African child. So sharp, so fast, that in I think it was the American scientist and the politician Thomas Jefferson who said that the sub-Saharan African man who is Black requires less sleep and can labor throughout the day.
you know, it will be induced by the slightest amusement to sit up till midnight. So with this, it says that these guys cannot advance. Therefore, means there's a suspicion that these guys will not be able to do well arithmetically. Okay. So, however, like by I think 1791, there was an African guy from sub-Saharan Africa who was able to calculate some of the geometric problems. And then he came back again and said, he's so sorry for this statement. So I think the history has been written. What then can we do within our own capacity to rewrite all these stories? Okay. I mean, with our pen, with our researches, we can do a lot. Let's focus on the solutions rather than the problems. I think that should be our discussion.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Arik, I wanted to just ask very quickly. Clearly, you conceptualize yourself, you know, as an African, as you should, and I mean that's, you know. But I guess I'm curious in terms of your experiences within the African spaces, whether it's in Kenya or, you know, here in Cambridge or wherever. When you identify as an African, how have you been accepted? I mean, like you mentioned, you obviously are not Black, but clearly you are African. How has it, what has your experience been like within the Africans, even within the African spaces, identifying as an African? Do you have any, you know, stories or anything?
This is quite a deep one. Like, I've had a few identity crises about this. It's just like, so in Kenya, I'm seen as Egyptian, but everyone knows I've grown up there. I speak Sheng when I can. I speak a bit of Swa. I speak a bit of Luo, not Luo, sorry. I do not speak Luo. I'm not gonna claim that. A bit of Kale and so on. So like back in Kenya, I fit in, but obviously I'm different. And then comes the Egypt side, which is I'm no longer Egyptian because I've lived my whole life in Kenya. So you can't claim, and like I wear the Kenyan flag the whole time. And then coming to the UK, like I feel like it's really interesting because, for instance, with Black British people, like I tried to go to ACS events and so on, and I never felt like I belonged there because the nuance of my experience, because of how things are messed up in the UK and how racialized the UK is, and the experience of Black British people who've grown up here is so different from Black people who grew up elsewhere where being Black is the norm. I've like within Black British communities, I didn't feel as welcome because I felt the need to explain myself on several layers for someone to be like, oh, okay, you can be in this space. Whereas like with ASCU, like with the African Society of Cambridge University, because it's more like postgrads and so on. So it's more international Africans. I feel like I can belong with them more because there's that nuance of me growing up in Kenya. And so it's a bit confusing. I've stopped trying to fit into places. It's just like, I'm just me. If someone will take the package, they'll take it. If they'll not, shauri yao is what we say in Kenya, their problem. But it's just like, yeah, it's very difficult. And for instance, it makes me question a lot, like this is going a bit too deep, but I'm an oversharer. Like when it comes to relationships, if I'm ever gonna have a partner, what are they gonna fit in? Because what am I gonna bring into the mix? And it's just like, what kids am I gonna bring up? What languages am I gonna teach them? English, Arabic, Swahili? And it's like, yeah, it's confusing. Sorry, I've gone too far, but like, it's a mess.
Good answer.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a complicated thing, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for your insight.
Thank you so much, Arik, for like the discussion and for everyone's contributions. So now we've got the final story, which is between EA and Kwabena, and they've titled it "Surprised in Ibadan: The Weaving Together of Ashoke and Kente." So yeah, you guys are free to talk whenever you want to.
Thanks, Itunu.
I should just go.
Yeah, you go ahead.
Okay, so my name is Kwabena. I'm from Ghana, born and bred.
In Kumerica.
Yeah, in Kumerica. Well, there's this social media trend now where Kumasi, where I currently live and work, go by. Anyway, that's a digression. So I was born in Kumasi, raised in Accra, which is the capital city. And this talk, we have only 10 minutes, so it's going to be a very condensed version of our story, quote unquote. My wife is Iye, she is Nigerian, but we just wanted to share a bit, you know, in the spirit of Pan-Africanism and integration. So our own little contribution to African integration and the sweat and tears that went into it. So, I'm Ghanaian, I'm a medical doctor. I'm a psychiatrist, actually. So, but I'm very interested in child psychiatry, in children, and, you know, I would have been a pediatrician if I hadn't been a psychiatrist. So, you know, anyway, so back in about 2015, I got an email from the director of a master's program in Nigeria. She was looking for applicants, for people who are interested in child psychiatry. So, I mean, I responded, you know, and at that time, there were a lot of questions like, why are you going to Nigeria to go and study and do masters? Has Britain closed this doors, or has America closed this doors? You know how our people are, you know, and I'm like, well, I want to do child psychiatry. I'm curious about Nigeria. I'm going there. And people have always teased me in Ghana that I probably ended up in the wrong country, because they say I'm very, quote unquote, aggressive. I'm more Nigerian than Ghanaian, you know. So I was just curious to find out about my supposedly lost country. So, I mean, all that in the mix. So I just applied, ended up there in Ibadan. I had never been to Nigeria before. It was a very interesting experience. First week, you know, the director of the program was really warm and everything, but yeah. So driving on the Nigerian road, Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, was my first shock arrival, where there are no lanes on the road and everybody just, you know, but somehow the chaos works out because nobody hit anybody. So I was like, okay. There I was thinking I knew everything and I'd seen Africa. You know, I had no idea. Until you've seen Nigeria, you've not seen Africa. Ghana is a joke. Anyway, so let's skip ahead. So we started the program, and I got elected as the class governor. It was there were about 20 in the class, about 6 different African countries, plus Nigeria 7. So the director used to talk a lot about her children. I mean, she's a proud mother. She's a professor of psychiatry, very proud mother. And she has 2 children, and, you know, my daughter this and my son that. My daughter is, okay, well, interesting. And then she mentioned that her daughter had written a book when she was 14. And I said, okay, that sounds interesting. So I went and bought her daughter's books. I started reading her daughter's books, and I was impressed. But I thought to myself, I mean, Kwabena, come on. You know, this is not going to go anywhere. So just forget about it and move on, you know. And sorry, just another little digression. At the time I had gone to Nigeria, I hadn't been so lucky in love. You know, to summarize it, it's not for, and it wasn't for lack of trying, let me just put it that way, but somehow my love relationships did not work out. So I guess subconsciously I was looking for a wife, to put it bluntly. But I mean, on a conscious level, that's not what I was going there for. I mean, I was going to get a master's, but I guess subconsciously, if I'll be honest with myself, I mean, my tentacles were always up. Like, you know, I'm in my early 30s. My mother is giving me pressure. Where are my grandchildren? Aren't you marrying? You know, so anyway, so I ended up in Nigeria, class governor, read this interesting, very intelligent girl's book, you know, but she's your director's daughter. And if you intend to finish your course, you better respect yourself and just go there, go and learn, you know. Anyway, so of course, I mean, the director's daughter was EA. She came down from school, just having graduated from Harvard undergrad. And she came to the center. I think the first time that I saw her, there was some defense going on. It was like defense of the batch ahead of ours, their proposals. So I rushed into the room. I was late. My director had told me to be there because she wanted me to, you know, see how it's done. And I was late. So she was very annoyed with me, and I was just flustered, you know. And then I saw this gorgeous lady whose book I'd read. And then I said a prayer to myself. I said, God, if it is your will, give me a chance to talk to this girl. And I just left it at that because I knew it's one of those impossible things. I mean, you know, but I mean, I was half joking about the whole thing in my head. And lo and behold, I got a chance. I went to the director's office and she was there. So I struck up a conversation with her. Oh, how are you? What's your name? And then we ended up talking about some very academic, something about Augustine's Confession. Anyway, so it's just not a typical first conversation, but I was impressed. And I had made up my mind then that in fact, so this girl, I'm going to pursue her. Again, I was half joking in my head. Then she ended up, some months later, she ended up teaching one of our classes, ethnographic methods. And so it was almost as if, well, it looks like the thing is falling into place. And as class governor, I had to interact with her. So back and forth, Miss Omibodum, can we get class notes? I have to share it. And she was very nice and polite and everything. And then my aim, or my should I say my modus operandi? No, I shouldn't call it modus operandi, but I set myself a target that, no, I have to get her number. But of course, I mean, I'm being very honest, but you can imagine the complexity of the situation. She's teaching a class. What lines can I cross and can I not cross? So anyway, eventually, I don't remember how I did it, but I found a way of getting a number, something about the email not being fast enough, so I had to call her, Anyway, so we started talking and chatting. And then the things started getting serious. I mean, we enjoyed each other's company, so on and so forth. And then I guess one day I woke up and I realized, my goodness, God, now what are you doing? Do you not fear God? Your director's daughter. So, and by that time I had, I had decided that, okay, no, this thing I'm going to pursue it and pursue it the right way. So, long story short, that one of the scariest days of my life, I set up a meeting with your mom, remember?
You skipped the story.
Which part?
Yeah, John, sit down, John. Got him talking to Kitty. So, okay, anyway, so first day I met Kwabena, he was a hot mess. He was really sweaty and everything. And so he came to, so I went to my mom's office and they were having this defense event. And so he came in late and he was really sweaty and obviously embarrassed. So after the talk, I was sitting in one of the offices and then he came to talk to me. So I just thought he was there by accident. And then anyway, we struck up a chat and we obviously, and I enjoyed talking to him, but I just forgot about him. Like my head was not really in that space, to be honest. And so anyway, a few weeks later, I had another opportunity to go into my mom's office. And so we bumped into each other and we got talking. And so then I started teaching the classes at the center. And then I always seem to be bumping into him coincidentally. And
was it a coincidence?
And so after one of the classes, he came to meet me and said he wants to read that can I give him some of my lecture notes, that he overheard the lecture and it was really interesting. So anyway, I said that, he should give me his email, that when I get home, I'll email it to him. But unfortunately that day I traveled to Zaria, which is in the north of Nigeria. And so I kind of forgot. So anyway, when I came back 1 week later, I happened to bump into him. And then he was like, oh, you never sent the lecture notes. And I apologized profusely. Meanwhile, throughout all that whole week, he had just been so sad and thinking of me. I'm just joking, I don't know. But anyway, I emailed it to him and that's how we got talking by email. And I didn't even realize that I was falling for him. But I was somebody that never really carried my phone around. And then my mom was like, who are you talking to all the time like this? So that's how we started chatting on WhatsApp. So I just finished university and I had the opportunity I got a fellowship to go to Guadeloupe for 1 year for a traveling fellowship. Mm-hmm. And so my mom was going to go to this conference in Calgary that Kwabena was going to go to because it's a child psychiatry conference. And so because Guadeloupe I could get a flight from Canada, French Canada, to Guadeloupe. So I just decided to take the opportunity to go to Calgary just to see Canada, since I'd never been there before. So he didn't know until the day before when we were texting each other, and then he was like, oh, he's going to Calgary for this conference and everything. And I was like, I'll be there. And I could even feel from the chats that he was so shocked and excited. So anyway, in Calgary, because of how Africans face visa issues, my mom, he and I think we're the only Africans at the conference, because you know how they don't like this country, they don't like to give visa to Africa. But it was very good because it was sad for the other Africans that couldn't come, but good for us because we got to spend a lot of time together. Meanwhile, I didn't know that he was hatching this plot to propose to me. And so one day, one day I said that I wanted, because I was mostly there too, because I wanted to see the city. So I said that I wanted to go to a garden called Princess Island Garden. So he said, oh, that he wants to come with me. But then I was beginning to suspect that this friendship was a bit more than just a friendship. So when I came down, he was writing something seriously. So I just thought he was like condensing his notes for the day. So anyway, I got to the lobby and he got up, and so we walked towards the garden, and then we're talking. Then he asked me that what are my goals for the future? what would I like to be written on my tombstone? Like really deep questions. And so at the end, he now said that he has something for me. So then he started searching through his bag, and then the letter was lost. The letter was lost.
I think because she in the lobby, I somehow dropped it there or something. So anyway, so there I was looking very stupid with, yes, what is it that you have to say? I'm like, oh, what is it that you have to, anyway.
So he was just like really, really embarrassed because he couldn't find the letter. So anyway, we walked back to the hotel because after we'd been in the garden, and then later on that evening, he like texted me that I really, really like you.
That was the summary of the letter. It had a poem and everything. I was just very, very sad about that letter, to be honest, because I really poured anyway. So my mom is always very interested in my affairs, so she was asking me what happened and everything. So I gave her the gist, and she was like, hey, this is my student. And so Kavena knew that he had to talk to her very soon. Yeah.
So
yes, anyway, so when we got back, I set up a meeting with her, and with my heart in my throat and with a very somber face, told her, Ma, I love your daughter and I want to marry her. And she kept the straightest face ever, as if she was about to flog me. So I thought, well, what the heck? I mean, I've already said it, so I just poured out my heart that she's this, and she's a wonderful person, and blah, 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 and I'm very serious about this, and, and I'm telling you because I think it's the right thing to do, and I understand if you don't approve, and I mean, because I'd already started, so, I mean, what's the worst that will happen? They'll throw me out of Nigeria, and then that'll be the end of that, so, yeah, but she had a good reaction. I mean, she said...
And I mean, you were also concerned because you had dated in Nigeria before, and
oh yes. Oh well, why adding those details? Anyway, but based on past experiences, I thought that it was important that I got parental consent, basically, because unfortunately, I've been a victim where, and you know how it is, even within our own countries. I mean, as a small digression, it's a digression, but it's important, because even with my own mom, I mean, I'm Ghanaian, and not only am I Ghanaian, both my parents are from the same ethnic group. So I was always expected to marry from within the ethnic group, or even if I'll go outside, So when I began to show signs, quote unquote, to my mom that it's unlikely that I was going to bring home her Ashanti daughter-in-law, the first reaction was no. And then later on, so I mean, I talked to her, and then later on she was like, okay, you know what? I married an Ashanti man. It's not like my marriage went perfectly anyway. So, whatever makes you happy. So at least from my side, I knew that they were open to it, but I didn't know if they were as open to the extent of go outside Ghana to find a wife, So I had been, I knew how important it is within the African context to make sure that the parents are okay with it, so to speak, on the same page. And thankfully, in my case, she gave me her approval, and I even got her dad on the side to to date her daughter. So you want to skip to?
Yeah. So that's yeah. So anyway, after he sent me the letter, I was like, I gave him a little bit of waiting though, but it wasn't too long, maybe like 1 week or so. And I was like, because I knew I'd already fallen for him, and so yeah, so that's how we have lived happily ever after. Yeah, we've had our fair share of ups and downs. I mean, even in terms of like cultural differences and learning to understand each other. But yeah. I mean, personally, what I've learned from the experience is learning that your way is not the only way, and also just being patient with going the extra mile in terms of understanding where people are coming from. Because many times I realize that even like tribal conflicts that you might see, or like ethnic conflicts, even in places, they start from really tiny things and people refusing to let down their pride. And in some ways, I've been proud like that, thinking that, oh, this is the way it is done in my culture. This is the way it's done here. This is the right way. And then you realize that, no, that's not necessarily the case. So like being humble, willing to learn, and being patient with others to help them, even to give them that patience to allow them to understand who you are and where you're coming from.
Yeah, and I guess I would add to that. I mean, planning our wedding, I mean, which we don't have time for it, but it was a whole chapter on its own. Getting my people, organizing them, blending the two cultures, for the wedding. It was a very beautiful, meaningful thing. But I guess for me, what it really taught me, I was also afraid that my people would not be willing to accept and be open to, because we also have a way in which we do things, and that is what they expect, But I mean, I'm just grateful that common sense prevailed and everybody recognized that in order for things to merge together, everybody has to compromise and everybody has to give and take. And I guess for me, the big lesson was, I think we have a lot more in common, as Africans, and in fact, as people, than divides us. Because, coming over to Nigeria to marry, I mean, we're from a matrilineal society. The Yoruba culture is very patrilineal, and so on and so forth. But like EA has mentioned, I came with the determination, with the understanding, that in spite of everything, I mean, whether to we are all seeking to achieve the same things. We have the same values, just that we go about it in different ways. And if you learn to recognize that, I feel that African integration is far more feasible and achievable than it looks on the surface. Yes, it's not easy. I mean, it hasn't been a straightforward. Even little things like even terminology or terms that you use or words that you use or the way you say something can mean a whole different thing depending on the cultural context or background that it's coming from. But if we keep a positive attitude and we keep an open mind, and not just an open mind, but we start from a fundamental premise of trust of each other, that people are just people at the end of the day, and everybody wants the same thing. Everybody wants to be accepted and to be loved and to have families and the same aspirations. I think a lot more can be done and can be achieved. So we've been married for 2 years now, forever to go.
Amen.
And I mean, so far, I think it's been a positive experience, and I would do it over the same way if I had the chance to do it again.
Me too. So anyway, we wanted to show you a brief clip from our wedding and the melding of the cultures that happened at the traditional wedding. So let me share it. Oh. Oh, sorry, it's just taking a bit of time.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay. Okay, that's it. Yeah.
In Nigeria and in Yoruba land.
Sorry, can you hear? Yeah, okay.
Our lady Mesa, Yeah, baby. I like the way you shake body.
Sorry, the music has stopped, so to start again. But that's basically the traditional wedding. So we both wore ashoke and kente. So kente is like the Ghanaian outfit, and his traditional outfit Ashanti, and ashoke is the Yoruba traditional outfit. So this is him prostrating, because in our culture, if you want to, that's Yoruba culture, if you want to get a wife, you have to prostrate for the family as a sign of respect. And then this is the girl usually comes in last, dances in with her friends. So these are just family. So that's it.
And that's the Ghanaian side.
Okay.
Okay. Let's forward a little bit.
So after the wedding, we both changed into kente, and then dancing again with that season cultural fabric. So this is just dancing again. So this is me trying to do the Okay, so that's us.
Thank you so much. That was like the cutest thing ever. Does anyone have any like comments or questions for them?
So I have one serious question and one jokey question. The serious question is, how did you guys both make it to the UK? Because I remember when I first met EA, you hadn't come here yet, and just like, how did you guys traverse that? And then my second question is Jollof.
Well,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, right now, in the interest of peace in the house, I'll say Nigerian jollof.
Because that is true.
Yeah, well, you know.
No, but the other day I had some really good jollof from his aunt though. So I'll say Ghana jollof is also really good. Not as good, but also really good.
Peacekeeping.
Yeah, and
okay, so the UK question. Oh yeah, so Arik, because Trinity College. So I came first for my MPhil, and Kwabena also. I mean, once he realized that I was planning to be here for a while. I mean, so actually our whole relationship was long distance until we married. which is one of the things I learned. Like, I never wanted to do long distance dating. I don't know what I was thinking, but it was just one of those things that I really wanted to be in the same space with the person I was dating. But I mean, I think that also helped me grow and helped me realize that, I mean, there's also not one way to date, and even to be married. Even though, I mean, I would advise if you're married to be together because it's just, I mean, it was difficult the first year when we were apart and I was in the UK and he was back home in Ghana. But then, I mean, he also applied for the PhD because, I mean, since I too was going to stay on for the PhD, and thank God it was a big miracle, a big prayer topic and a big miracle that we were able to get here together. So.
Yeah, and I mean, what I'll add quickly to that, I didn't want to do long distance either, but I guess maybe I'd seen enough in life to realize that if you don't take risks, you won't get anywhere. And I mean, I was determined to be married. So I told her that let's get married. We don't have to work out everything in terms of, oh, let's wait until we've both got. I said, no, let's get married. Because if once we are married, we will find a way, any which way, to be together. And when I was saying that, I thought I knew what I was saying until we got married and then she was away and I was all alone and I was like, I was what we call a bachelorhood, a married bachelor. And then I thought about, what am I doing? What's the essence? I've gone all this way, gone to carry this bride, and I'm still a bachelor. So anyway, let's just say that there's no bigger motivation to make sure your personal essays is on point, like sleeping in a bed alone. So I had to follow her. As they say, if the mountain will not go to Mohammed, Mohammed will go to the mountain. So by hook or by crook, I had to end up in Cambridge, and well, thank God it worked out. So
I'm glad it worked out. You guys are so adorable. Oh my goodness. I'll shut up now.
I had a question. I had a question which is quite a serious one. Feel free if you don't want to answer, obviously. But it's about misogyny in general. So, like, as you all aware, for most societies in Africa, we have kind of misogyny like tied up with our tradition. So, in your marriage, you're obviously a very successful woman with a very successful man. How have you kind of like addressed this in your relationship? Have you addressed it? Do you still take the role of cooking and cleaning and obeying your husband? Or do you also both cook and he cleans and, because, that equality thing? Feel free not to answer because it's one of those things I'm like, it really interests me when I meet an African guy because I don't cook, I don't clean. So I really want to know how you guys figured that out. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, no, that's a very good question. Actually caused a lot of debates in our relationship. I mean, Kobena is more of a like a traditional school of thought in the sense that he sees the wife as more to keep the home. And I mean, I didn't come from that school of thought, but I mean, that's the way he like grew up and that's like what he saw. But I don't think it's like the crux of, to be frank, I mean, people talk about gender equality and all that kind of stuff. And yes, it is important, but I don't think it's the crux of the matter. I mean, he told me when he was marrying me that even if I don't cook a single meal for him or clean for him, that it doesn't matter. And it really doesn't, because what's most important is actual love. And even because, especially we as Christians, we believe that the calling of a husband is to love his wife. I mean, you may not subscribe to this school of thought, and I'm not here to preach or anything, but even the calling of God for a husband is even much greater than wife. If you read Ephesians, I don't know if you're a Christian and you read Ephesians 5 and you go and read the descriptions of what is expected of a man, it's basically to sacrifice your life, to love your wife like your own body. And so it's actually a higher calling than even equality. And I eventually came to that point of view that things like cooking and cleaning, I mean, we both do house chores, but things like cooking and cleaning are not the crux of what makes a marriage. You could be in a marriage where a man is cooking and he doesn't treat you with respect and he doesn't treat you as a woman. And so it's more about, does this person respect you? Does this person respect you as a human being? And is this person willing to even sacrifice their life for you? And so, I mean, I don't think that, so in my own perspective, it's the issue is not really about, other people come from a different might come from a different school of thought, and I think that could be respected. But I think that for me, the big issue is not who does the chores, is are you willing to love me? Yes, love me to death. And I think that's what's most important, because chores just can be done. You could employ somebody to do chores for you. So it's like a very minimal thing. But would you, when it really, really matters, would you really be willing to love me to death? And I think that for me has even been more important than who cooks or who cleans.
Yeah, I mean, and from my perspective, I mean, along with all that Iya said, one of the things that I've realized being married, which I guess is one of those things that you just have to learn, is people make a fuss about a lot of things which are really surface or superficial, when there are more deep-rooted things that are more important for the marriage to work. I came at it understanding very clearly that I'm marrying somebody from a different culture, from a different mindset, from a different upbringing. At the back of my mind, I had told myself that, look, this thing is going to work by hook or by crook. Even if she doesn't agree with me on my view of marriage or any of these things, I have decided that this is the woman that I want, and I want to spend the rest of my life with. And so, I mean, like she said, even though I have a very traditional view, I believe in roles, quote unquote. But roles are very, for me, at the same time, it's more important that the marriage works than all these roles. So even if like she doesn't believe in it or subscribe to it, and you know, like she said, I should cook, so be it. I mean, it won't kill me to cook. I won't die. And at the end of the day, as long as the marriage, I've shown that I'm willing to make this marriage work, regardless of my own strongly held views. And I mean, she'll tell you, we are both very opinionated people. I mean, you know, we are both in Cambridge, so obviously we have very strong views. But if you don't get to a point where you are willing to be wrong, or you are willing to be right but be wrong, and just let it go, the thing will work. Because if it's not about cooking rules, today is about that. Tomorrow it will be about what school should the children go to. The next day to be about, I mean, you will always find something to divide you, or something to fight on, or something that you have very, very strong views on. So if you don't, your starting premise, so to speak, is not one of, this is do or die for us, so to speak. I mean, we are both in this together for life. And so I should be, and that means by definition that I should be willing to be the fool, quote unquote. The thing is not going to work. And once you both have that, I feel that, I mean, there's nothing that you can't overcome. I mean, there's no, whether it's family issues or there's nothing that you can't overcome. But if one of you or both of you come with a mindset of, I am going to insist on my way, you know, the marriage is dispensable or sacrifice. It's about my happiness, quote unquote. So if the person's not making me happy, then, you know, like a jacket that you don't like, you can just fling it aside. Then you will not find happiness. I mean, again, personal view, but yeah. And so far, the formula seems to be working. I mean, here we are doing so.
Thank you so much. Does anyone have any more questions? I mean, I had a quick question. I was wondering, did you guys end up doing the wedding in Ibadan, or like?
Yes, we did. Yeah, the wedding was in Ibadan.
Yes, I brought my whole clan with praise singers and drummers across 3 or 4 borders.
Yeah, they came. Yeah, he brought a crew of drummers to add their own cultural elements, which was really nice. They were determined to oppress us at the wedding, but we, the Yoruba people, we stood our ground. So.
Oh, that's so cute. Yeah, so that was our final story. I just have a few kind of things to tell people about. So leadership positions for the ASCU committee are still going on if anyone wants to join. I think Cynthia will post the sign up link in the group chat so that anyone can just like sign up if you'd like. So yeah, thank you so much to the speakers. Thank you to the people who attended. Now we're just gonna have some chill out time so we can go back to some of the discussions that we had like prior to the beginning. And yeah, so anyone just feel free to talk. The floor is open.
So I had a question for Iya and Kwabena. What do you guys study?
What do we study? I do sociology. and he does psychiatry.
I just want to be taking notes. Don't worry. So literally, like, linking to Tanya's question, I remember one time my mum told me, like, oh, like, Shay, it's great that you're doing X, Y, and Z, but then, like, the question of, like, marriage came in and how, like, a man view me and all that kind of stuff. And I was just like, I would rather be single. Like, I didn't say it out loud, but in my head, I'm like, well, if he's gonna move like that, I would just be single. But now it kind of gives me hope that we can find a way. And I think the way you guys phrased it as well, I guess the argument or the, like, commentary has always been about, like, oh, who's going to do the cooking and who's going to do the cleaning. And I guess that's what we use to kind of, like, symbolize, oh, who's loving who and who's submitting to who. But then that's just, like, one example. There are things, like, way bigger than that. And, like, at the core, do you have that, like, fundamental, like, love and sacrificial love, like that, for example, that the Bible talks about? And how do you then express that? For some people, it's, like, through, like, cooking and cleaning. For some people, it's, like, through other ways, like writing all those applications to Cambridge and all that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, actually, sorry, I'm gonna burst in. The reason my parents didn't want me to come to Cambridge was I'll be too overqualified to find a man to marry me. And I'm like, ooh, what do you mean? And it's really interesting because even till now, like, my dad's like, yeah, now you're graduating, so when are you going to go to Egypt to get married? I'm like, who, what, where, when? But yeah, it's quite interesting what people expect of you within certain context. But yeah.
And also, just double check, Iya, did you grow up in Nigeria?
Yes, I did. I grew up in Nigeria. I grew up in Ibadan. Yeah.
Because one of the things I was thinking about, like, so I've grown up in the UK, so then, like, and I say I want to marry a Nigerian, for example, but is that a Nigerian who's grown up in Nigeria, or is that a Nigerian who's grown up in the UK? Because, like, as Arig was kind of saying, that international versus maybe growing up in the diaspora, that, like, is very different. And, like, even though you think, oh, like, if I marry, like, a Nigerian who grew up in Nigeria, although I think I'm, like, marrying a Nigerian and he is a Nigerian, and I also view myself as a Nigerian, as, like, two different kinds of Nigerian.
Your version of Nigeria.
Yeah, I actually know somebody. I know somebody who grew up in the UK who married a Nigerian who grew up in Nigeria. And I mean, she did mention that there was, I mean, because I mean, yes, we're all Nigerians, but I mean, there's definitely different experiences from growing up in different places. But I mean, there's nothing that love can do. Like, love goes the mile. I mean, there was, she said, she did talk about mentioning that there was an adjustment period where she was like, oh, why are you doing this? And it was like, why are you doing this? But I mean, I think the most important thing in any relationship is being committed. Like, that is the number one thing. I'm being willing to fight for it no matter what. I mean, sometimes it could be tough, but in the long run, I believe, well, we're not long run yet, but also looking at people who've gone ahead of us, in the long run, I can see that it will pay off. Because, I mean, nobody's perfect. No, you don't come from the same background. I mean, we've faced that, like, misunderstanding each other. I mean, that's just like the bread and butter of relationships. It's what happens. But the most important thing is being willing to fight for your love, no matter what, I feel.
Yeah. And I would say the same thing about, you know, even in terms of, like, finding a mate or a partner. If the person is not committed to you, it doesn't matter what qualifications you have or what qualifications they have, or, you know, whatever. I mean, we know people, I mean, I don't talk about other people's business, but we know people in the flat that we live in who are from very different educational levels. I mean, in the flat that we live, obviously, that one, the lady is a Trinity, Cambridge student, the guy is not, you know, anything by a long shot. But I mean, at least on the surface, they seem happy. They have, you know, that kid. That's why I'm saying that, you know, people at the end of the day, and that's one of the big lessons for me. If you understand that people are people, they are good and they are bad everywhere. There's no, I mean, even though, yes, stereotypes are useful for generalizations, don't judge individuals by the stereotypes, because he's an individual. So you can find a Nigerian raised in Nigeria who is very open-minded or whatever. I mean, who is sensible enough, I'm sorry to use that word, but who can marry a Nigerian raised in the UK? And you can find a Nigerian raised in the UK who is just, I mean, from Ghana, I know, speaking from Ghana, there are Ghanaians who are raised in the UK who are more traditional than even me. I'm more open-minded than some Ghanaians, my cousins and things like that, who were supposedly raised in the UK, you know. So, I mean, I don't know, it's about the person and about their character and their commitment to you, because love is very nice and mushy and fluffy and Princess Island, and I'm all starry-eyed and looking at this beautiful girl with dimples and everything. But when it gets to the hard work of making the thing work, yeah, it goes well beyond all the butterflies. I mean, you need to have like a hard grit of I'm determined to make this thing work, both of you, because yeah, as for those differences and the fights, even if you might, like my mom told me, she married somebody from her own ethnic group. Their villages are barely, but their marriage was not a walk in the park. So people are people, and you yourself need to be the kind of person who is ready to make sacrifices. And hopefully you will attract that kind of person into your life as well.
What tips do you have for so let's say I found like a potential, what is the checklist I need to make sure so that this person is like ready to put the hard work and the commitment and it's not just surface level?
I guess, yeah. But I guess we could just give what we were looking for as people. I don't think, I personally am not, everybody has to find what they think is important. Like not everybody will wear the same clothes. So you have to find out what's important to you. For me, what was important when thinking of whether this is the man that I want to spend the rest of my life with was, the number one criteria for me was that he was God-fearing. So he was a Christian. So for me, that was very, very important, because the kind of sacrificial love, because I knew that, and I said, this is not for everybody, but that's why I said it is my checklist. It was important that he was a Christian, because I know what the Bible says about what is required for a husband. So I know that if that is the ultimate kind of love. He's basically required to love the way Jesus did. And if Jesus' story, so that was if that is the template, this is the kind of person I want to marry, because I can always report that person to God. So for me, that was the number one thing. The number two thing was, is the person a kind-hearted person? So even from things like my mom said about him, about how he would go out of his way to help classmates, that there was one night a classmate was sick and he basically took him to the hospital and paid. He wasn't the one that told me. I overheard my mom saying it. He basically took the classmate to the hospital and paid his whole hospital bills. The way he took care, there was another of his classmates who was having mental health issues, and he was the one that alerted the administration to help her out. So I heard all these things about him, and I was like, this person looks like the kind of person that would take care of me, that wouldn't give me stress, that would actively seek my welfare. Another important thing for me was that, can I intellectually engage with this person? Because it's not, I don't think it's a do or die point, but I think for me that was also important, because you don't want to be in a house where you and the person you're talking to, you can't talk to them, you don't have the same interests, you can't engage on that wavelength. So I think for me, that was also another important thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess, I would say to that is, look, your question was how would you know, there's no one size fits all, but for me, I found it useful if you see how the person behaves around other people in non-romantic relationships. How I think a person's character shines through a lot in terms of their daily interactions with people. How does the person treat his sister or his sisters, his mom? How do they talk to friends, and colleagues? That for me would give you a very, a very strong indication of when the quote unquote love wears off, or when the butterflies and the emotions wears off. What is this person's character like? As for the sweet words and things like, if you're a smooth poet, you can ask you. Writing poetry is not hard. it's not, but that's not the crux of the matter. If the person's when nobody's observing, or when there's no obvious benefit to be had, they treat people in a certain way, you can be sure that eventually it's going to be you. And so for me, when I saw I heard stories about her, and I watched carefully the way she interacted with her family. I watched the way she interacted with students, with friends. That gave me the confidence that this is somebody who is solid and dependable. And so, in the thick of life, when things get rough and I'm annoying her, so to speak, at least you know, even when she's angry with, you know, her brother, and you observe those types of things, and you get a fair sense of who this person, you know, is. It's hard for people to pretend for forever, really. I think they will always leave clues. They may not leave clues with you. So if you focus on just how they are treating you, then that's when you can be deceived. But if you look at how they treat other people, particularly in non-romance, where there's nothing to be gained, how do they treat those who are lower than them, so to speak, in terms of like maybe they are richer than the person, or, you know, people who are below them, younger than them. How do they treat those who are weaker than them? Yes, that gives you a fairly accurate sense. I mean, that's the way I see things here.
Thank you. I'll let you know how I get on.
I'll be excited to hear your story.